Hey gang, welcome to Trutta Good's Confidence Fly Pattern Tying Video Series. The title is a little long, we'll work on that, but we're going to tie some of our favorite patterns, whether that be nymphs, dry flies, or even some streamers, maybe. But tonight we're going to focus on the purple France fly. This fly has worked really well for me in sulfur situations or pretty much any time of the year. It's has a purple wrap on it, but it doesn't really look purple. It's more kind of violet, which I kind of like because I'm not a big bright color person. This kind of looks a little bit brown, but when the sun hits it, it gives it a nice little purple color. So what we'll start with this. We'll start with a size 18 Upside-Downy with a 2.5 millimeter copper bead. Copper, I just like in these color schemes because the darker flies like a black, I'll use silver beads, and lighter flies like brown or olive, I like to use copper beads. That's just personal preference. You can use whatever you like, whatever color you like, black, copper, silver, gold, whatever you like. Thread wise on this, I'm going to use orange Nano-Silk. I like Nano-Silk on these because of how thin it makes it. This is a 18-aught thread, so it's extremely thin, but it's super strong. You can use up to a 70 denier on this, but most of my friends' flies use a 70 denier. But I've started to trend on this Nano-Silk because of how nice it is and how thin the profile you get with your France flies. The other materials you'll use micro tubing, purple. The only one that I like is Hareline. No other brands seem to be as thin or as good quality wise. You get the same consistency in diameter, in strength, in flexibility with Hareline. So that's why I choose them every time. You can get pretty much any color, and you can experiment with different thread colors underneath because they're all pretty transparent, so you can really change the color of your flies, and that's actually why we're using the orange thread. Otherwise, we're using a CDL Tail and some copper dubbing. Pretty much any color dubbing you can use on these. I'd try to keep it more natural, if anything. Some flash is good. I like a little bit of flash on these. So we will get started. I just do a couple wraps back with my Nano-Silk, and you can see there's basically no thread there. Like there's no bulk from the thread, which is super nice when we're trying to keep these very thin. The next important part is we'll take our tubing, which looks nice and purple. Purple's a real good color. And we'll slot it into the bead there, into the slot. That kind of just gives it like a little house to live in. You don't have to do this if you're using a countersunk bead. You could just kind of lay it up to the bead. If you're using an inverted bead, you could just kind of lay it up to the bead as well. But this is nice, so it has somewhere to live while you're tying it back. So I'll do 2-3 wraps and then start tugging on this, and you could pull this super hard. And I'm pulling it real hard, and you could tell that this doesn't give it a big profile. And there's your body there. We tie that back, and then we're ready for a tail. So we'll get our CDL tail, and we'll take 5 or 6 strands off of here. Doesn't really matter, just so it's not too thick or too thin, just so it kind of looks like something on there. Lay that on top, one wrap, and what that does is it allows us to adjust the size of our tail. So I like it about 1 hook length. You could do shorter, you could do longer, it really doesn't matter, just as long as it looks like a nymph. And then we'll just come forward with our thread, and we'll snip this off here. So if you can look now, the taper is really small, and that's what we want with this. And that micro thin thread kind of helps with that. I mean, it really helps with that. But the most important thing is really stretching that tubing when you're tying it on. And if you lash it down good enough in the beginning, it's not going anywhere. So the next part, we will just bring this up to the front. So we will wrap this real tight around here. Just keep wrapping it real tight. You can see the body.
Oh, frick!
Okay, we had some technical difficulties there, but we will continue. Now we're gonna wrap the tubing up to the front. So by doing this, we want to stretch this real tight. I'm gonna try not to hit my camera tripod again, because that's exactly what I did last time, and it knocked over my camera. So we're keeping that real tight, and that profile is super small. And I've noticed with this thread, you gotta lash it down pretty good. So I'm being careful not to hit my camera again. We're gonna do 3 wraps there and make sure it's a little tight. And then we can snip that off there. And that's really not going anywhere, but I like to give her a couple more twists on it. So if you could tell here, the body is super thin, and that's what we want for these. And you can go right up to the bead on that, as I did, or you can go a little bit behind it to fit your dubbing in there, whatever you want. But there's just a little bit of taper in there from our thread start, which is pretty ideal. But otherwise, you don't want a big bulky fly, and we're not tying this to the bead, like tapering it to the bead. I see that a lot happening for a lot of people that tie flies. So we just want to make sure that this just looks like a nymph, real thin, so it sinks nicely and cuts through the water and drifts nicely. So after this, we will go on to the dubbing. I use a dubbing wax. You don't have to. I know a lot of people do, a lot of people don't, and you do whatever you want. So this is some copper dubbing. It has some flash in it, some UV particles in there. And what we want to do is put on the smallest amount possible. And this might be a little too much for my liking, but that's okay. So you see, we're going to put a little noodle on there, touch dub. So it's just a little noodle, a little bit too much, but that's okay. You could use a little bit less. And we just want a small little case on there with our dubbing, little collar. And that's it. Now we just got a whip finish. I like to do 3 and 3, and just give her a little trim, and she's good to go. And you know, it's super simple. This is what I fish 90% of the time in different colors, but the purple has been working really well for me this spring. And it's a fun little tie because it's purple, and you could say that you caught a lot of trout on a purple fly. And yeah, that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And our hooks are definitely for sale, and our beads. So go buy some. Thank you for watching.